Good morning, everyone. I'm Suh Sang-bum, VP at Samsung Software Center. I'm very happy and excited to be here to giving a talk about open source to Samsung Electronics. And first of all, I'd like to thank Linux Foundation to give me this kind of great opportunity to talk about our open source activities in Samsung. And in my talk, first of all, I'd like to slightly touch Samsung Electronics business areas, and majority of my talk will be given to discuss about importance of open source activities and in Samsung Electronics to become significant contributors to open source community projects. Samsung Electronics was established in 1969, and we have got many different products. We have 9 different divisions to produce and design from smartphone, DTV, and semiconductor solid-state devices. When it comes to open source software activities in Samsung Electronics, in 10 years, I remember that it started in Software Center at the time. We just only touches embedded Linux systems to just to taste what is open source software for CE products. At the time, we just utilizing embedded Linux from a venture company, Monta Vista, and then we apply some open source projects and components, a couple of set devices prototypes, for example, PDA or any home appliances. And then in 2005, Linux kernel was applied to mass production of flat panel TV. It was a great opportunity for Samsung to jump to #1 company in TV industry, I think. We changed real-time operating system development environment to general-purpose Linux-based development environment, and we increased our productivity a lot. However, we faced a couple of challenges. One is that relatively long booting time compared with that of real-time operating environment. So we had got to reduce Linux kernel booting time up to 6 seconds, I remember that. And now, last month, we released in the market Linux kernel-based NX300 digital camera. It is kind of DSLR grade digital camera. However, we reduced further. Now the cold booting time less than 3 seconds with the help of some snapshot booting technology. And another one is that we have got many different DTV lineups and models. When it combines with, for example, different I/O devices, we have got to manage a lot of I/O device drivers as well. So we have to decide, manage main line of Linux kernel for our product to reduce managing cost. On top of this kind of successful deployment based upon open source Linux kernel to the TV industry, we started application of open source component to more products, such as smartphone and camcorder and camera. And you may see that our last year's number of sales units sold in the market for our Galaxy Android smartphone, more than 200 million units last year, and 57 million units of DTV. So all of the products based upon Linux. And a lot of software components, majority of them are comprised of open source components. So I believe that open source components and open source community projects made contributions to Samsung's business success very much. And the next one is that we started thinking about contributions more proactively. So we created open source community projects. In 2008, we released Zen hypervisor software port on ARM CPU. And also next one could be OpenCL for ARM CPU-based community projects. And last year, we released Tizen software platform source code, including SDK. Besides, we also use many open source components for our cloud infrastructure projects and commercial service platform. When it comes to substantial contributions, example, Samsung Electronics now become, in 2012, one of the top 10 companies sponsoring Linux kernel development. Though it looks like still infancy period in terms of number of patches. However, we try to do our best to become more leaderships and more as a leading company to develop more number of patches and make contributions more. And the next one is that Tizen. We released Tizen 1.0 software platform early last year. And this year, in February, we also released 2.0. Tizen software platform has got two major components and interface for third-party app developers. One major interface is that HTML5-based web API interface. That is more friendlier for operators and set vendors, I believe. And in addition, we also are providing some native API interface that can be compatible with our old native apps developers and the environment. And the last example is that in 2011, in Asian Zen Summit, it is reported that Samsung's contributions to Zen hypervisor, particularly for ARM CPU port, reaches 15% in terms of number of line of code. So we believe that this kind of activities shows that Samsung has tried to become leaders in contributing open source community projects. And we have got many open source component projects so far, particularly 53 open source community projects listed in this slide. For example, Linux kernel and Enlightenment Foundation Library, EFL, and the Zen like open source community project and WebKit. So we have increased and brought up engineers more, and we would like to hire maintainers and support committers. And in addition, we substantially try to make contributions to open source communities by submitting patches. Also run open source labs. In the past, we just only working within teams to make contributions to open source patches to the communities. Now we started opening open source labs worldwide, 2 in Europe and 1 in States, Silicon Valley area. And besides such kind of open source labs, we also are encouraging our engineers to work for open source community projects in any software platform project. So I think that I learned so fast for this slide. I'm so nervous about in front of this kind of big audiences, and this is my first time in front of Linux kernel communities, even though I have given many talks and speeches to Zen community, but this is a very special moment for me to have this kind of opportunity. So please excuse me. And we are committed. We are committed to growing pool of developers that should focus on open source community projects across that will be used for our product. So if you are very much interested in our activities, and if you want to create our future based upon open source projects, then please visit our booth outside of this room after this talk. So that is my speech.